next storyteller you'll notice on your program is Stephanie, and I know your people, and I know this story is going to be Stephanie's a third generation storyteller, so this should be good. And she's also a third generation entrepreneur. Here to tell us the storied history of the Totem resorts and the Brown family passion for Lake of the Woods. So we're eager to hear that, and like to welcome you to the stage, and thank you for coming, Stephanie.
Thank you. I don't think I'll be able to top the last story. It won't be as funny. Okay. So today I am going to talk about, like Lisa mentioned, the history of Totem Resorts and how our family came to Canada. Thank you, Lisa. Mrs. Metcalf originally opened Totem under the name of Kwe Metcalf's Canadian Camps in 1935 and operated until 1945. This extraordinary lady actually shot the moose in the top corner of the picture that you can barely see. That moose is still at the resort to this day, along with the original fireplace, and the wheel in the original part in the back is still at my dad's house to this day. We moved it over there. Mrs. Metcalf sold Totem, which was Kwe, to Mel Stinchfield in 1946, who renamed the resort Mel's Canadian Camps. Mel operated until 1954, and then he sold to Bill and Lucia Salvador, who Lucia still remains in Suneros to this day, and they took over in 1955. Bill and Lucia changed the name of the resort to what we all now know as Totem Lodge. Bill and Lucia, along with their three kids, Steve, Bill, and Janie, were all at Totem until they sold to the Gravesons in 1969. After 6 seasons, the Salvadors had Totem back again. Bill and Lucia then sold to the Millers, who decided after running a resort for less than 1 summer, it was too much work. So they decided to take the business back, so there the Salvadors had it again. Now I'm going to flash back to 1953. That was the year that my dad was born in Atlanta, Georgia, to a school teacher mother and a general in the Air Force father. A year after my dad was born, my grandmother gave birth to my dad's twin brother and sister. Needless to say, she had her hands full. From there, they moved all over the United States as they went where my grandpa would get stationed. Eventually, my grandmother got tired of moving with 3 young kids, and they settled in Illinois. At that time, my grandfather was also a doctor, so he eventually went to go work in a university now that he was settled in one state. After my grandparents divorced, both my grandparents remarried, and my grandfather had 3 more children with his wife. In 1960, my grandpa brought my dad up to Suneros for the very first time, and it was love at first sight for my dad. He couldn't wait to come back to Canada every year to fish with my grandpa. For many years, they returned on an annual basis, along with my aunts and uncles as they got old enough to come along. They loved Suneros so much that my grandpa eventually went on to buy 2 different cottages in Suneros throughout the years. Most of my extended family would spend the summers at the cottage while they were on summer vacation. In 1974, my dad started to date my city slicker mom and eventually brought her to Suneros for the first time. You can imagine my mom's surprise of coming to Suneros for the first time after being raised in the suburbs of Chicago her whole life. She works at Q8 Place now, so if you want to stop by there, you can ask her for yourself. In 1976, my mom and dad married, and several months later, along came my brother Eric III. In 1978, I was born, and we continued to reside in the suburbs of Chicago. In 1979, my dad's dream came true. Our family had purchased Totem Lodge. He packed up my mom, Eric, and I, still in diapers, and moved us to Canada. He also brought along his best friend and high school roommate from military school, Jeff. Jeff was with us until he passed away in 2010, but he was basically our family and a piece of the furniture. In 1985, my mom and dad bought Salvador's house on the island just away from Totem. You can see there's a bit of a trend there, my dad buying things from the Salvadors. It was a long process, but over the years we built up Totem with adding on to cabins, building and rebuilding cabins, and purchasing more boats and motors. In 1989, the year my younger brother Dustin was born, we purchased Wiley Point Lodge from the Gill family, who also reside in Sioux Narrows. The lodge had been closed for many years, so my dad was back at it with tearing down buildings and rebuilding cabins and the main lodge. There is no longer one original building left at Wiley Point. My older brother Eric III ran Wiley Point for 10 years. There was a couple of managers in between, Eric and Dustin, but now Dustin is going into his 6th year of running Wiley. In the late 1960s, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson decided to build an exclusive resort. They called it Yellowbird because the song Yellowbird was Mrs. Thompson's favorite song, and her husband called her that, so they decided to call the lodge Yellowbird. Mr. Thompson eventually passed away. Mrs. Thompson was back in Illinois one winter when she was at a jazz club and heard a 3-piece band playing. She told them that they must come to her resort and play. They came to the resort for 3 weeks that summer, and the one band member never left. Mrs. Thompson eventually fell ill, and she married the jazz band player on her deathbed and signed the resort over to him. Sadly, she passed away shortly after that. In 1998, we purchased Yellowbird, which I've been managing since we took over. We added on to all the buildings and even built another cabin. To this day, Mrs. Thompson still keeps a watch out on Yellowbird. Kathy Peacock, that had spoken earlier about the library, her niece got married at Yellowbird, and she had asked me to tell a story about Mrs. Thompson, who is a ghost at Yellowbird. Since I've been there since 1998, I've only had 2 encounters with Mrs. Thompson. The one encounter that I did have with her is one of those I've never run so fast in my life. I had realized I was locking up the kitchen, and I realized that I forgot to lock the beer coolers. So I went through the kitchen really quickly after I'd locked the one door, went out and by the big huge fireplace at Yellowbird, saw somebody walk by, and I heard a swinging door swing that I had just locked. So needless to say, those beer coolers were locked really quick and I was out really fast. Not only do we host fishing groups at all of our resorts, we also host conferences and weddings. Totem, Wiley, and Yellowbird each have their own lounge and restaurants open to the public. They boast panoramic views, which have their own talented 5-star chef who create exquisite masterpieces fresh each day. In 2008, we bought French Portage, which is about 20 minutes from Wiley Point, and we completely upgraded the cabin. That same year, my dad married his wife Sandra, who is also a significant part of our family business. In the past few years, we've become an authorized dealer of Evinrude, Interstate Batteries, Husqvarna, St. Croix, Shimano, and Navionics. My dad is planning to retire in 2018, and he says he's planning to hand the family business over to myself and my two brothers, but we all know that he'll never have us put out the door. Our father has raised us to believe in the value of family and not just viewing our resort as a workplace, but more of a lifestyle and as a home. My brothers and I were all raised in the resort environment, and now my brother Eric and I have the privilege to raise our children where we grew up. We have numerous guests and employees who have returned on an annual basis, who we all consider to be part of our extended family as well. My older brother's son, Reader, who turns 6 tomorrow, and my daughter, Addison, who is 7, are already talking about taking over the family business when they get older. We plan to keep our resorts in the family for many years to come. Thank you.